Hey everyone! If you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks!
Hi, I'm Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Exit Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. Coming live this week from Colorado is Mrs. Stephanie Hauser. Hi, Stephanie. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How's it going?
It's going really well, and we just started catching up, but this is, I think, the first time we've talked in almost 10 years with you, I guess.
Yes, and it's so good to hear your voice live. I love it.
Likewise, and we met at Mills College, which is we met in graduate school there, but it's a Bay Area school, mostly dedicated to feminism, I guess I would say. Is that your take?
Yeah, I think so. And it was awesome. It was awesome to go in and meet you.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I was one of like 20 guys there in the graduate program. The undergrad is all women, and I was polite and quiet as often as I could be, and you helped me be less polite and quiet in classes. So it was a great experience. But it's been, like I said, it's been 10 years, and what I do remember from our very strong friendship in those years was you always had a deeply philosophical mind. So these are the people I'm inviting early onto the podcast, and so you were a must-grab guest. So with that in mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us how old you are, your why you live in Colorado, and what generation you think you belong to, if any.
All right. Well, I'm 38, and I live in Colorado. I used to live in the Bay Area, and I met my now husband in 2012, and he lived out here, and I was out there, and when we started dating, we were long distance, and it just really felt like my time in San Francisco was coming to a close. I mean, I think we go through seasons in life, you know, and that season of mine in my 20s was really pushing me to something new. And I remember there was this feeling where things just were not coming together for me. You know, like everything just felt kind of like halted for a second. And I remember hearing in like a dream, like I was so frustrated. I said, like, why is this not working? And I heard like, because you're supposed to go to Boulder. And I like woke up and I like called Ben and I was like, well, I know we're only 4 months in, but I'm coming to Boulder. and I came to Boulder. I took like a leap of faith and just came out here, and we've ended up married with kids, and we own a coffee shop, and this is where we live, and it's awesome. So that's where I am. And I guess technically I belong to the millennial generation. I graduated high school in 2000, was born in 82, so that's like my technical zone. But I wouldn't necessarily say I identify necessarily. Like I don't really use that to categorize myself too much, but in general. But that's where I am in the time and space continuum of how we've sort of cataloged ourselves.
Yeah, perfect. And that's why I asked the questions, because I think it's actually like a really weird thing we've started to do more and more in this culture, which is to try to like label people in these gross large packages. And so I'm trying to actually break that down and just hear what people think. So yeah, I'm like you. I'm a year older, and I don't know what box to put myself in, but I definitely do not refer to myself as a millennial. So, which is probably the most millennial answer you could have. So, go figure.
Exactly.
Well, okay, so you already gave us a couple nuggets of like philosophy meets spirituality, and so I am more than obsessed with dreams, and we actually just recently had a guest on who is going to air before this airs, so I feel safe saying this. She talked about how like she thinks reoccurring dreams need to be adhered to, but this was not a reoccurring dream. This was just a one and done. But on the subject of dreams, have you had any other experiences in your life that were, that like profound?
Yeah, so I would say I've actually I would say that dreams are not typically the medium for connecting with the spiritual world. So I guess I should just say outright, like I believe in God, like the Trinity, like Father, Son, Spirit sort of Trinity situation. I'm not really one of those people that's like, hey, let me tell you about a friend I have who also has some crazy ideas. Like I'm not really like that kind of person, but I would identify as Christian. And I would say that my connection with the spiritual world is usually a little more upfront. So I hear audible, like words from God. I feel like sense energy. I totally believe in like there's a whole spiritual realm happening around us that we either are or are not aware of at certain points in our lives. And so I would say like that came to me in a dream, which was very unique. Whereas normally I could be in a meditative state and hear some things, or in a prayer state and hear some things. Like there have been times where I've like, I feel like God is very conversational with me, but yeah, I've had a lot of actually profound visions and experiences that sort of teeter on the edge of like what we would deem, reality, even though I sort of see it all as real.
Yeah. And I'm always trying to ask questions from the like attention span of the average skeptic I meet. So people in this country are like usually very accepting of the statement I am a Christian, but then when you start to say the things you just said, some people start to roll their eyes. I personally don't, and I'm actually totally intrigued by what you just said, but maybe just to like help ameliorate that huge gap. And I know I'm not here to convince a skeptic, but I would like you to give a kind of like more clear explanation of when you say God is sometimes conversational, are you hearing like a male or female voice that is speaking to you, or is it like a thought process? Could you possibly explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I can try. I think that I wouldn't say like male or female, because I think that God is all things. Which again, like I don't know how helpful this is going to be, but I feel so. Like I'll say this: one time I was looking at Ben, my husband, who is so awesome. So I'm looking at Ben, and I just thought, man, I love him. And I heard God say to me, "So do I." Like it was very clear. Like we were both just like looking at this really wonderful human, and just like it just like reverberated this like energy between us to just say the same thing about this person that we love. And I think that, and again, yeah, I think that the term Christian is really loaded, especially now. I will say, like, um, I think that God is good and loving, and is not, is probably not anything that I could even think up or put in a box, as much as I'd like to try as a person.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do want to directly ask, then is it fair to say that God, as far as you understand it to be, is not actually a Christian itself? You are a Christian. That's your path through God? Or is that unfair for me to say that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, to me, it's like I believe in like Jesus, right? So it's like, but I also believe in like it's not just New Testament stuff. It's like Old Testament God, like I said, like this Trinity figure of like God the Father, because Jesus. So again, I believe in Jesus, and Jesus talks about God the Father. So like the Father, but again, I think people are like, oh, Father, male, blah blah blah. But like I am a woman, and I believe I am of God, and I believe that I have parts of God in me. And so it's like I think it's unfair to just be like he all the time. But I think that it's like God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, and it's all the same thing, like working toward, like, I don't know, working toward the goodness.
Well, actually, I mean, the yin yang concepts, which are as old as anything we've ever discovered from human philosophy, directly say what you're saying. They just talk about the male female counterpart, and one exists because of the other. And, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, of course, you can't tell anyone the answer to that. So, yeah, okay. Well, that's a good catch up as far as like those loaded terms and what you think. And again, I don't care what anyone thinks if they're skeptical or not. And I hear love in your voice even. And actually, I was going to say, I bet all of your friends would speak of the very energy you just talked about, except they would say they get it through you a lot, because I remember this. Like, you're a very uplifting and warm person, except when you're very angry, and then you're not. But
yeah. Well, I could say I've learned to incorporate all of the emotions into my life. But yeah, I'm like a big personality. It's just who I am, I guess. But that's the thing. Like, I feel like this, like the love piece, like I really just believe in like a loving presence in our lives that like seeks us and cares for us and like yearns for us. Like, I don't really believe in I would say currently. I mean, I also think that like your faith and stuff can change a lot throughout your life based on your experiences or whatever. But I would say like I don't believe in like hell. I believe that there's like space apart from that love and space living in that divine love. And I don't believe that death is sort of like the end of that space. I think that, it's like, I think that God is always seeking after our hearts.
That is so beautiful, and I really agree with that. I love how you phrase that, the space between love. So yeah, um, let's get back to some of these experiences you had because they're fascinating, and I think they're really the core fabric of this podcast. Is I think people really relate to that. So what is your like? I know what I'm trying to ask you about, but I want to hear yours. What's your go-to like? Oh yeah, you don't think there's a God? Like, what's your story for that?
Okay, I think so. So I want to give people listening the space to wrestle with everything that I'm saying. I think that it's very good for us as people to question what we hear and wonder what it's all about. And there have been many seasons in my life where I've rejected exactly what I'm going to say right now, and now I just can't even deny it because it happened in front of my face. But I want to give people who are listening permission to really feel whatever they're bringing to the table with what I'm about to say. Just wrestle with it, feel it, whatever. But like that is so welcomed in this space. But for me, my son, I have 4 kids, and one of my sons was born just over halfway through pregnancy. And he was born at 23 weeks, which is under the current like age of viability considered in the medical community. So age of viability is at 24 weeks gestation. So that's just over halfway through. A full-term pregnancy is 40 weeks. So we're at 23 weeks. And
Real quick, just I want to back up the tape for a second because for the purpose of the story, were you like at home and you just like felt something and then you called a doctor, or did you have to rush to the? Can you just give us that little glimpse of?
yes, great question. So so I had come down with a really bad fever and I could not get it down. And I felt like I had the flu, and it was the middle of January. So I thought that's what it was.
And this is not COVID era, right? This is
No, this was pre-COVID. And I just could not keep any fluids down or anything. My fever was really, really high. I was talking to my midwife, and at some point she just suggested that I go into the hospital. And so I went into the hospital. They thought it was my appendix. Like no one could figure out what this infection was, but all my blood work came back with like a major infection. And I was there for 24 hours, and things seemed to be getting better, and then they suddenly just tanked to worse. I was in excruciating pain. My fever was really high, like this infection was coming to a head. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I went into labor. And it was like the doctors all realized that what I had, the infection I had is called chorioamnionitis, which is an infection of your uterus and the baby and your placenta and all these things. And I had this infection based on what they can tell for most of my pregnancy since about week 6. And so I didn't know it. And they were actually surprised that my body had held on so long. Like normally, it would have resulted in like a late term miscarriage or potentially giving birth like way too early to be able to save the baby. But at 23 weeks even, they were like, I mean, this is pretty much impossible. The kid doesn't have lungs developed yet. And, it's like, it's all this stuff, right? So it's like, he has like these pockets where lungs should be, but they're not able to like inflate and things like that. And so, our first option, so I go into labor and she's like, the doctor's like, well, you have to birth or this infection is so strong in your body, like you could go septic and things like that. Normally they tried to delay the labor and stuff if you went into labor that early, but because of the infection, I had to birth. And then they were like, we have no option to help save your baby.
Wait. Okay, so I have to interrupt. Just I mean, this is like
please
unreal. I am. First of all, I'm very emotional right now because my, as you know, because we talked before the podcast, my wife is 36 weeks pregnant and could give birth any day now. So this is like for 100 reasons emotional. But even without that experience, I would be just unbelievably moved right now. So what did they basically make it sound like there was no way your child was going to live at this point?
So where I was at one hospital and that was the option there. They don't have the technology there. And I mean, even then it's like, I mean, the odds of this kid living at all, even with the best technology, are 1% when it all came down to it. So what was so cool, we can even get back to the spiritual piece of this. So I call my friend Tracy, who's this like spiritual warrior. Like she's this like totally rad, tattooed, big spirit person. And she like comes in and she walks in. I like call her in the middle of all of this. And she walks in and she's like, no, we're fighting for that baby's life. She's like, there's another option. And then we're like all on this like big, like, we're like, yeah, like this baby's alive. Like he's doing awesome in my womb, but like, we got to figure this out. And we end up airlifting from this hospital down to a big hospital in Denver. And they were like,
Oh, I love this story.
yeah, they were like, you should know you basically have zero chance of this baby living, but we will try. And I was like, we'll take that chance. Like whatever that is, we will take it. And it was this cool, it felt like, so you want to talk about the spirit, you want to talk about energy. The hospital we were at, it was like, there was a spirit that was just like, it was like a spirit of defeat. It was like we were under it. My husband and I were like weeping bitterly, like it was rough. And then in comes Tracy and like speaks some truth to us, right? And like, so you can get into whatever spiritual realm you want, but like speaking the truth, like it changes the waves around us. Like it changes all that vibe. And it was like there was a yes in the room, and it changed everything. We get on this helicopter, we land at this new hospital, and they're like, they sit us down and they're like, 1% chance this kid is going to live through not only birth, but like throughout the time it would take to keep them alive in the NICU. And also like with like, there are so many things that can go wrong. Like, you know, with just even trying to get a tube down his throat to get him to breathe. Like so many things can cause this baby not to make it. And we had a 1% chance of survival, and we took it because in my mind, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to choose hope. I'm choosing to hope right now that somewhere in the world, there's a 1% population of these kids that made it, and that could be our son. And it didn't matter, because if I got 5 minutes with that little baby or a lifetime with that little baby, it was all going to be worth it to hope for that, just to hope for this little one. And it was in that space. It was so cool because we took that chance, and as I was birthing, we lost his heartbeat, and, you know, everyone in the room kind of freezes because that was that. And I went into myself, and I saw God with my son, and I said, okay, God, we don't have a heartbeat. I see you with him, and you're walking away from me. And I was like, you can take him. He's yours. Like, this baby belongs to you more than to me. And then because I'm me, so you want to talk about, like, I can get really angry. I say to the Lord, I'm like, okay, Lord, like this baby is your baby. Like I will surrender myself to that. And I will demand that you give him to me. And I was like, but give me that baby. Like I will fight you for that child. Like I will surrender to whatever your will is here, but I want that baby. Like I believe that baby belongs here. Like I want him. And like, I'll fight you for him. And then I was like, but I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait any more time to see if we find this heartbeat. I want to know right now what you're going to do. You take him or you give him to me. And it was like 30, like milliseconds, like not even, it was like all of a sudden they put the Doppler on and bam, they caught his heartbeat stronger than ever. And I knew then that he was going to live.
I mean, my hair is like fully upright on my arms right now.
Mine too. I even lived it. I've like told this story 1,000 times. And it's like, and that baby comes out at 23 weeks with no lungs, and that little kid cried. He came out and he cried, and we have it on video, and even the doctors are shocked because this little baby with no lungs came out just warring for his life. And so that's what I mean about this. Like, I totally believe in this interplay between like reality and the spiritual realm, where it's like when you are like engaged with it, you can see. For me, I would say, I can see that spiritual presence already having these conversations with God. I can show up in surrender, grief, you know, whatever, fight. I fought God for this baby, like, but I also like surrendered. It was like I surrendered my will and what I wanted, but I also like held expectation in the other hand of like, but I expect you to do the miracles you say you can. I put that out there, you know, and it was like, not everyone gets their miracle, and I'm very sensitive to that. I'm very sensitive to that because Zev, our son, he went through 5 months in the NICU, and he fought for his life. He fought every day for his life. And there are so many things that could have gone a different way, and it didn't for us. We have a perfect 2.5-year-old boy who has zero signs that he was premature.
Which at the time they said that was going to be impossible, right? I mean, they said like
at the time that was impossible. It's an impossible story. He is an impossible story. And there were times in that NICU, like I could see things in the NICU. It's crazy because, sorry, I'm like so. I love talking about this story, but like I would like I would see things. I'd have these like visions in his room, and people would come in who like don't even believe in God. We had people all over. It was like we had like Christians, like atheists, Buddhists, like people who, believe in Judaism, like every different corner of the world where they were like fighting for this kid. We had all this awesome support. And I was like, there were moments where I was like, I don't care how you pray or like whatever you do, like give us all you got because this kid is fighting. Like we need the entire like battlefield fighting for him. And it like connected. That's how I'm like, that's how God works. He like reaches you wherever you are to me. Like it didn't have to be under a specific, whatever you believe. Like it just was like we were all in it. And I thought that was like the most miraculous part. Like everybody fought for this little baby. And there were times where I swear to you, like I would see things, somebody would come in, they don't even believe in God, whatever, they'd walk out and be like, did you see the yellow, like sparkly mist in his room? And I'd be like, yes, I did. I just said that to someone. Like, oh, did you see that there's like a presence in there? And I'm like, that's an angel. I can see it. Like, there were all these things, like it just started to ripple out. His miracle did. And it just like, it was crazy. And I know I sound like a crazy person, but I can't deny what I saw. Like, it was all these people just coming together to witness this little fighter make it. And like I saw, there was a night he almost died. Like truly, it was like he was on his last breath. I had to watch them like resuscitate him. And the doctors, we had done everything we could. That was it. We all threw up our hands and we were like, that's that. And I swear to you, I saw like God breathe life into that baby. And it was like all of a sudden the doctors are like, we have no idea what just happened or how that baby lived through the night. But like I saw it, and it was like, it's crazy. And I know it sounds wild. And and that's what I'm saying. Like a couple years ago or 10 years ago, I might have been like, okay, nice lady. Like, but it's crazy. I like can't deny it anymore because I saw it. Like it's in front of my eyes. Like I saw it happen. So yeah, so I live in the spiritual space. There you go. That's me.
Trust me, I had this exact same conversation with a former guest actually yesterday about she was, this already aired, so she's the one who said she's a witch, and she's like, what do you think people think about that? And I was like, I think most people think you're crazy, and I think they don't believe you, and I think that I don't care either, like what they think. And so with this, it's the same thing. Like my hair on my arms rose. I heard things that intrigued me, and I also heard things that I cannot deny resonate with my life and my life experience. What I want to pick apart, because we're actually pretty far into the podcast, and I haven't even asked yet, the what do you think happens when you die question is normally just that, but I want to ask you with a twist. The very first time God was taking your baby, was your baby alive and dying, or had your baby never been alive?
Well, I mean, so the reason that we fought for his life, I mean, Zev he never looked sick on the monitor. That is sort of why we were like, I mean, this is the thing. All these decisions, again, another blanket statement, it's all impossible. Like these are impossible decisions for a parent to make. So whatever decision people make around these things is absolutely okay. Like, I really believe that. I think there's so much judgment and so much like weird stuff around like, oh, well, we chose life. And people would like praise us for that. And I'm like, no. You don't get to praise us for that. We didn't do anything. We like chose to hope, but that doesn't take away anybody else's grief in this space. Like it's impossible. So like Zev to me was always alive. Like we saw him on that monitor, that heartbeat was on. So it was like we were fighting for that life. And I really believe that it's like, I felt like we were going to know, like I trust God enough to tell me in my truest heart, like in my deeper inner, like spirit man voice, like that it was time to let go. Like I really believed that I would know that. And I think that people do know that, like when it was going to be, if it was going to be over for Zev, that I would know that in my deepest heart and I would grieve it. But until that time, I was just being obedient and not giving up the fight for him. Like it changed me more than Zev, like I think Zev was always going to be fine. I think it took me like surrendering that space.
So to the actual question then, I mean, did you have an opinion before this, during this, after this about what happens when people die?
Yeah, I mean, I think my opinion is still the same thing. I think that it is funny. I have 4.5-year-old twins, and one of them just yesterday, I don't know where this came from. he started to cry, and I asked him what was wrong, and he said, if I die and go to heaven, I'm going to miss you. And it like, oh my gosh, it melted me. And it's so funny because then you like fumble your way through this, like, oh, like what's heaven, you know? And then I'm like making all this stuff up, but I don't even know. Like, I mean, I don't know what happens when we die. Like, I can tell you what I believe happens when we die. I believe we get to be in this, like, the biggest love like the biggest, most divine love presence. And what that looks like for you is what that looks like. And like here I am just stumbling through it with my son, but I do believe that you get to be with, I think you get to be with the divine, with God, and I don't know, you know, I think I've always believed that, and yet like seeing Zev almost die, he didn't die, but he was he was like on the edge that it took a miracle for him to come back, and I truly feel like seeing that night in the hospital a couple weeks after he was born, it's like I saw, and I've heard this in other guests share with you, this like time it's so circular. Like I saw like the beginning, the end, like all of this working together. Like it's not like death is not the end, I don't believe. But I don't know what it looks like from here on out, I guess.
Yeah. So then I guess the most logical question to ask is the trailer for the show. But so how does this affect the way you live your life? I mean, I know my answer about you, and that's one of the reasons you're a great friend. But how would you answer that question?
I mean, I think I can just say it like this, where it's like when I am feeling close to the God figure, like when I'm feeling in the spirit, there are things that exude, like there's love, there's generosity, there's hope, there's joy, there's all these things. And when I'm not in that space or feeling far from it or whatever, I can feel the sort of like darker edge of the spiritual world coming in. Like, you know, like I think one of the things that I would say, like, it affects my life in the sense, not about what I do in the world. Like, I think when I feel close to God, I am just generous and loving, as opposed to like, I have to be generous and loving so that I can, like, I don't believe that it's transactional like that, where it's like, I'm good and loving so I can go to heaven. It's like, there is a joy for me in living in that space, and honoring the love that I've received by giving it to others. And I think, you know, so it's not necessarily affecting by my conscious choice of how I live. I suppose, I mean, there's like moral codes, that we as a society have agreed upon, and there's like the 10 Commandments and all that stuff. But I also believe like Jesus shifted that whole narrative, and turned everything that we believed on its head about how to be in the world. And that's just sort of where I fall, where it's just like, I want to be a good person. I think that that's not unusual for most people. But I don't feel like it's tied to what happens to me in the afterlife, if that makes sense. Because I don't believe the afterlife's the end.
No, that totally makes sense. I do have one last question I have to ask because it's related, and I know that it's important for me to hear your answer. So this is a selfish Mike. I don't care about my listeners. Y'all hear that? So I joked, and I was joking about like your anger and stuff when we were younger. But with that joke aside, you're not actually a mean or unhappy person. Your energy is, every time I've been in your presence, and including this phone call, it's always warm and uplifting. And even when you're mad, you're not mean. And I know that sounds weird, but like there is a difference. Do you think you were just born with this, or do you think this is something you cultivated and other people can cultivate themselves?
I think that everybody, so like, I'll say it like this for myself, because like, I would say too, I would say that I've grown into being able to tame my fury. So that's very kind of you to say that I'm, I'm not mean. I can get really furious. And I think that as I've grown, I've like learned to use that in appropriate ways, just like everybody can. I've healed through some childhood trauma stuff. I've like learned where some of those things come from, but I don't think anger is a bad thing. I think it's really appropriate, but I will say to you, like, you know, I think so. I think that we make these agreements sometimes. Okay, everybody. So if everything up to this point was not crazy enough, like, let me just say something even weirder. I think that we make these agreements either with ourselves of like, I'm agreeing with this is how I have to be in the world, or this is, this is where I come from, so this is who I am, or I accept this, or this is just the mode I operate in. Like, for example, that hospital that we were in, that first hospital, like, it felt like there was just this agreement with, like, this is the end of the line. And my anger in that space was not angry and mean. It just said no. I just very much said no. And I will fight that. I will fight whatever is telling me to stop, and I will push through that, through my anger, and like go forward in hope and trust instead of that anger. So it was a choice that I made. And I think everyone has I think you forget that you don't have to agree with certain things. You don't have to be a certain way. I want to tell people listening, like, if you have these agreements in your life that are holding you back or holding you down, like, you can agree otherwise. You don't have to listen to them. You can change. I totally think everybody can change. Come on. I'm like all about it. I totally changed. So I think so.
Well, Stephanie Hauser, that was an amazing answer and an amazing podcast. And thank you for agreeing to come on my podcast. And also thank you for helping us put another nail in the coffin. You have been listening to Coffin Talk, Exit Interviews with the Living. My name is Mike Oppenheim. And again, thank you so much, Stephanie. That was wonderful. And to our listeners, we will see you soon.
When I hear this song and I'm walking alone.